In the moonlit darkness of New Mexico territory, three desperate men are about to make the deadliest mistake of their lives. Breaking out of Yuma prison was just the beginning. Now, as they stumble upon Thunder Creek Ranch, they think they've found their ticket to freedom, a magnificent black stallion worth more than most men make in a year. What they don't know is that this horse belongs to John Deadeye McGraw. 20 years ago, his name alone made hardened killers tremble. 37 notches on his gun, each one a story of lightning-fast justice that no man lived to dispute. They called him the Angel of Death, the man whose bullets never missed their mark. These escaped prisoners are about to learn why even the devil himself fears Deadeye McGraw. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn painted the New Mexico sky in shades of amber and gold as John McGraw walked his morning rounds. 20 years of peaceful routine hadn't softened his movements. He still walked with the fluid grace of a predator, eyes constantly scanning. His surroundings, old habits died hard, especially ones that had kept you alive through decades of gun smoke and blood. Thunder, his prized black stallion, usually met him at the fence each morning, demanding his share of attention before McGraw started his day. But this morning, the corral stood empty, its gate swinging loose in the desert wind. McGraw's weathered hand touched the splintered wood where the lock had been broken. Most men would show panic or rage at finding their most valuable possession stolen. But 20 years ago, they'd called him Deadeye for a reason. His face remained calm, only the slight tightening around his eyes betraying the deadly calculation happening behind them. "Tracks are fresh," he muttered, kneeling to examine the dirt. 3 sets of footprints, prison-issue boots by the look of them. One man favoring his right leg, another with an uneven gait. The third, larger prints belonged to someone who knew how to move quietly but was too hurried to hide his trail. Amateur work. Inside his modest ranch house, McGraw opened a chest he hadn't touched in 2 decades. The wood was worn but well-oiled, like the memories it contained. His gun belt lay exactly as he'd left it, the Colt Peacemaker still gleaming, like the day he'd put it away. 37 notches marked its grip, each one a life taken in the name of justice. He'd sworn never to add another. "Sorry, Sarah," he whispered to the photograph on his mantel. His wife's gentle smile seemed to mock the iron he strapped to his hip. She'd made him promise to leave the killing behind, to build something that brought life instead of death. For 18 years after her passing, he'd kept that promise. But Thunder wasn't just any horse. The stallion had been a colt when Sarah fell ill, and through those long, dark months, caring for him had kept McGraw from drowning in grief. Now he was all McGraw had left of those better days. The old gunfighter's preparations were methodical, muscle memory taking over as he checked his ammunition and packed his saddlebag. His spare mount, a sturdy bay, watched nervously as McGraw tightened the cinch. Even the horse could sense the change in him, the return of something dangerous that had slumbered for far too long. From his porch, McGraw spotted dust on the horizon. Sheriff Tom Parker's wagon, right on schedule for his weekly visit. The sheriff had been just a deputy when McGraw first settled here. Young enough to know the legends, but smart enough not to mention them. "Morning, John," Parker called out, his cheerful tone fading as he noticed the gun belt. "That's something I never thought I'd see again." 3 men took Thunder in the night," McGraw replied, his voice carrying the weight of years spent dealing. "Death. Prison breaks, by the look of their tracks." Parker's hand unconsciously drifted toward his own gun. Even after all these years, the sight of an armed Deadeye McGraw triggered deep instincts in lawmen. "John, I got telegrams about those men. They killed 2 guards getting out of Yuma. Let me handle this officially." "Your jurisdiction ends at the territorial line," McGraw said, checking his saddle one last time. "They'll be halfway to Texas by sundown, and you'll be what? Back to hunting men?" Parker's voice carried genuine concern. You built something good here, John. Something peaceful. Don't throw that away." McCullough mounted with the same fluid grace he'd shown in his prime. "Peace is what I'm after, Tom. But sometimes you have to remind men why they should keep it." As he rode out, following tracks only he could read in the desert soil, McCullough felt the years falling away. The weight of the peacemaker on his hip was familiar, like greeting an old friend, or perhaps awakening an old demon. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another scorching day in the territory. But John Deadeye McCullough rode into it with the certainty of a man who had walked this path before. The only question was whether he could find thunder without adding any more notches to his gun. Behind him, Sheriff Parker watched until horse and rider disappeared into the heat haze. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He sent telegrams, warning every lawman within 100 miles that Deadeye McCullough was riding again. Not to help them catch him, but to help them stay out of his way. Sheriff Tom Parker's wagon kicked up dust as he rode hard into Thunder Creek, the small town that had grown up around McCullough's territory. The news he carried would spread like wildfire, and he needed to control how it broke. Deadeye McCullough riding again wasn't just news. It was the kind of thing that could empty towns and start wars. The telegraph operator, young Billy Wells, was already waiting outside his office. "Sheriff, got urgent messages coming in about those Yuma escapees. They..." "Not." "Now, Billy," Parker cut him off, dismounting, "get me Mayor Collins and Judge Harrison. Have them meet me at the saloon. And Billy..." The sheriff's face was grave. "No chattering about what's coming through those wires. Not yet." Inside the Dusty Spur saloon, old Pete Martinez was wiping down the bar with the same rag he'd been using for 20 years. He looked up as Parker entered, his weathered face reading the tension in the sheriff's stride. "Little early for a drink, ain't it, Tom? Need the back room, Pete, and bring a bottle of the good stuff." Parker paused. "The one you save for funerals." Pete's hand trembled slightly as he reached under the bar. "Christ, Tom, last time you asked for that bottle was when the Santiago gang rode through. What's happened?" "Deadeye's riding again." The rag dropped from Pete's hand. 20 years melted away as he remembered the last time he'd seen McCullough in action. The saloon had been different then, twice as big before half of it burned down in the gunfight. 7 men had drawn on McCullough that day. 7 men had died before their guns cleared leather. Mayor Collins arrived first, his usual pompous stride faltering when he saw the bottle on the table. Judge Harrison followed minutes later, using his cane more heavily than usual, as if the weight of the news had already reached him. "They took his horse," Parker said without preamble, pouring 3 fingers for each man. "Those Yuma boys broke in last night and stole thunder." "Sweet Jesus," Collins whispered. "They don't know who he is?" "Probably never heard of him," Harrison said, his judicial calm cracking slightly. "That's what happens when a legend goes quiet for 20 years. People forget, until they remember the hard way." Outside, the usual morning bustle of Thunder Creek was changing. Word was spreading, carried on whispers and worried glances. Mothers called their children inside. Shopkeepers checked their locks. Old-timers who remembered gathered on porches, sharing stories in hushed voices. "Remember the Carson boys?" Pete asked, joining them with another bottle. 4 of them, mean as rattlers, thought they could raid any ranch they pleased. Harrison nodded grimly. McCullough tracked them for 3 days. Found them in that box canyon, up north. Story goes he gave them a chance to surrender. "They didn't take it," Parker added. "Nobody ever found all the pieces." Collins dabbed sweat from his forehead. "That was before my time. But surely he's changed. 20 years of peace." "Tell that to his eyes," Parker interrupted. "Saw him this morning when he strapped on that gun. It was like watching a man put his skin back on." The room fell silent as each man contemplated what was coming. They'd built something here in Thunder Creek, a place where law meant more than the gun. McCullough had been part of that peace. his very presence keeping trouble away. Without a shot fired. "What do we do?" Collins finally asked. "Wire every town between here and Texas," Parker said. "Tell them there are 3 prisoners on the run. Tell them about the horse theft, but most importantly," he took a long drink, "tell them whose horse it was." "And McGraw?" Harrison's hand tightened on his cane. "Do we try to stop him?" Parker laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what army, Judge?" "No, we do what smart folks have always done when Deadeye rides. We stay out of his way and pray he finds what he's looking for before too many people have to die." As if to punctuate his words, thunder rolled in the distance. Storm clouds gathered over the desert, dark and heavy with promise. But the old-timers knew it wasn't rain coming to Thunder Creek. It was judgment, riding on a bay horse, carried by a man whose mercy had died with his wife 20 years ago. In the telegraph office, Billy Wells' hands flew over the key, sending the warning across the territory. "Deadeye McGraw rides again. 3 men marked for death. God have mercy on their souls." The message rattled down the lines, and as each operator received it, they understood. A legend had awakened, and the territory would remember why they used to whisper his name like a prayer, not to summon him but to beg him to pass them by. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as McGraw followed the trail, each hoofprint in the sand, bringing back memories he'd tried 20 years to forget. Thunder's tracks were distinctive, the stallion's unique gait as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. But it was the other marks that drew his attention, telling a story few men could read. "They're running him too hard," he muttered, noting the deepening impressions in the sand. 3 men, too heavy a load for long in this heat. Thunder wouldn't take kindly to that. The horse had Sarah's spirit, gentle with friends, hell itself. With enemies, Sarah. Her memory hit him like a physical blow as he rode past the old Martinez ranch. That's where it had happened, 20 years ago, where everything changed. The Santiago gang had been raiding farms across the territory. 7 men, each one a killer, led by Roberto Santiago himself. They'd hit the Martinez place at dawn, expecting easy pickings. Instead, they found Deadeye McGraw sharing breakfast with his wife. McGraw's hand unconsciously touched the scar on his left side. Santiago's bullet had caught him by surprise, knocked him clear off the porch. He could still hear Sarah's scream, see her running to him despite his shouts to stay back. Santiago's laugh, the second shot. He'd killed all 7 men that day. Not fast, like his reputation promised. No, he'd hunted them one by one, tracking them across the territory. Each death was a message. Each body left where it would be found. By the time he caught Santiago, the gang leader was half mad with fear, babbling prayers in Spanish. "You're the devil," Santiago had whispered, staring into McGraw's eyes. "La Muerte himself." "No," McGraw had answered, his voice colder than a mountain stream. "The devil shows mercy sometimes." The memory faded as his horse snorted, bringing him back to the present. The tracks led toward Broken Skull Canyon, a maze of red rock and shadow where smart men feared to ride. These prisoners weren't smart men. They were desperate, and desperate men made mistakes. From his saddlebag, McGraw pulled out Thunder's worn leather halter, the one Sarah had helped him make when the horse was just a colt. The stallion had been her idea. Something to give him. Purpose beyond the gun, she'd said. Something to care for instead of kill. Found him half dead in a box canyon, he remembered aloud, his voice rough with emotion. Mare dead from mountain lion, but this little black colt fought the cat off. More spirit than sense, Sarah said. Thunder had healed under their care, growing into a horse that combined his mother's speed with a fighting spirit that matched McGraw's own. When Sarah fell ill, it was Thunder who seemed to understand. The stallion would stand for hours by her window, his presence somehow easing her pain. After she died, caring for Thunder had kept McGraw from eating his gun. Each morning brought purpose, feeding, grooming, training. The horse demanded his attention, refused to let him wallow in grief. And slowly, the killing rage that had driven him to 37 notches faded into something quieter. Now, following Thunder's tracks through the burning sand, McCullough felt that old fury stirring. Not the cold, calculating anger that had made him famous, but something deeper. These men hadn't just stolen a horse. They'd taken the last living piece of Sarah he had left. His bay horse stopped, ears pricking forward. McCullough tensed, his hand dropping naturally to the peacemaker's grip. 20 years melted away as his senses sharpened, reading the desert's subtle signs. Wind direction, disturbed rocks, the silence of wary birds. Someone was watching. Most men would have scanned the ridgeline looking for movement. McCullough kept his eyes half closed, letting experience guide him. There, a flash of reflected light. From the canyon wall, probably a spyglass, one of the smarter locals, trying to gauge whether the stories about Deadeye McCullough were true. Let them watch. Let them spread the word. The more men who knew he was hunting, the fewer who'd interfere. A wise man once told him reputation was like a snake's rattle, a warning that saved you from having to strike. McCullough touched his spurs to the bay's flanks, moving on. The tracks led deeper into Broken Skull Canyon, where the real hunting would begin. These men thought they'd stolen a horse. By sunset, they'd learned they'd stolen their own deaths instead. Above him, storm clouds gathered like spectators at a hanging, dark and heavy with judgment. Thunder was coming to the desert. One way or another, the first body lay sprawled in a dry creek bed, half hidden by scrub brush. Prison denims, cracked lips, and a broken leg that had been poorly splintered. McCullough didn't need to check for a pulse. The buzzards circling overhead told him everything he needed to know. "Your friends left you behind," he muttered, dismounting to examine the scene. The dead man's boots matched one set of tracks he'd been following, the limping one. The desert was merciless to wounded men, especially those running from justice. Torn, wanted poster in the man's pocket caught his eye. Miguel Cortez, convicted of murder and armed robbery. But it was the other poster that made McCullough's jaw tighten. A crude map of Thunder Creek Ranch, drawn in shaking hands. This wasn't a random theft. They'd targeted his horse specifically. Sheriff Parker's wagon appeared on the ridge, kicking up dust. "John, got word from—" He trailed off, seeing the body. "One of yours?" "Desert got him," McCullough replied, standing. But this wasn't just a prison break gone wrong. They knew about Thunder. Someone put them up to this. Parker dismounted, his face grim. "Got telegrams from Territorial Marshal. These men, they're worse than we thought. Leaders James Mad Dog Miller. Killed 3 families during the escape. Other survivors his brother Luke. They're not just running. They're leaving a trail of blood all the way from Yuma." McCullough's hand rested on his peacemaker. Miller should have known. Man has a reputation for stealing prize horses, selling them in Mexico. "That's not all." Parker hesitated. "They're saying Miller's working with someone bigger, a buyer who's been targeting specific horses across the territory, high-value animals with bloodlines worth a fortune south of the border." Thunder's bloodline was pure Spanish stallion, rare in these parts, worth more than most men would see in a lifetime to the right buyer. But that didn't explain the map, the specific targeting of McCullough's ranch. "Someone wants me back in the game," McCullough said quietly, "using Thunder as bait. John, let me handle this. I've got posses forming in 3 counties. We'll cut them off before they reach—" "You know what Miller does to posses, Tom. Regular lawmen can't handle him. That's why someone pointed him at my ranch. They're forcing my hand." A shadow crossed Parker's face. "The Santiago connection. Word is Miller's been asking about you, about what happened 20 years ago. Maybe looking to make a name for himself." McCullough mounted up, checking his ammunition one last time. Then he's about to learn what those 37 notches really mean. "Follow if you want, Tom, but stay clear when I catch up to them. This ends my way." "Like Santiago?" Parker's voice carried a warning. "That kind of killing changes a man. John, even one like you. I'm already changed." McGraw spurred his horse forward. "Now I'm just remembering who I used to be." The trail led west, toward the Badlands where few men dared to ride. But in the distance, a column of smoke rose against the darkening sky. Another homestead, another victim of Mad Dog Miller's bloody path to Mexico. McGraw touched the brim of his hat to the dead man in the creek bed. In a way, Miguel Cortez had done him a favor. Now he knew this wasn't just about a stolen horse. Someone had orchestrated this whole thing, using Miller's brutality and Thunder's value to draw Deadeye. McGraw back into a world of violence he'd sworn to leave behind. They were about to learn that some legends are better left to rest, and some men are more dangerous when they're trying not to kill than when they're dealing death without mercy. Thunder's tracks led straight toward that ominous smoke, and McGraw followed, the weight of his gun growing lighter with each mile. The hunt wasn't just beginning, it was awakening something that had slept for 20 years, and God help anyone who stood between Deadeye McGraw and his purpose. The smoke led McGraw to the Peterson homestead, a small ranch where he'd traded for hay last spring. What he found there would have turned a younger man's stomach. The house still smoldered, its windows black with soot. 2 bodies lay in the yard. Jack Peterson and his oldest boy, both shot in the back while trying to protect their horses. Thunder's tracks were clear in the blood-soaked earth, along with signs of a fierce struggle. The stallion hadn't gone quietly. Deep hoofprints and scuffed earth told of a fight that had taken 3 men to control. "That's my boy," McGraw whispered, pride mixing with rage as he read the signs. A weak cry from the barn froze him mid-step. Gun drawn, he approached carefully, years of experience guiding his movement. Inside, he found Mary Peterson, badly beaten but alive, tied to a support beam. Her 10-year-old daughter Emma huddled beside her, shaking with silent tears. "Deadeye?" Mary whispered as he cut them free, recognition bringing hope to her battered face. They said no one would find us out here." They were wrong. His voice was gentle now, the deadly gunman replaced by the neighbor they'd known for years. "Did you see which way they went?" Emma spoke up, her voice small but steady. "The Black Horse, your Thunder. He fought them something fierce. Kicked Luke Miller right in the ribs, made him mad. She swallowed hard. They said they were heading for Broken Tooth Ridge, taking the high trail to Mexico." McGraw's jaw tightened. The high trail was brutal this time of year, barely passable for experienced riders. With Thunder fighting them every step, they'd be slow, but they'd also be desperate, and desperate men were the most dangerous kind. "The tall one, Miller," Mary added, clutching her daughter close. "He knew about you, said this would smoke out the famous Deadeye McGraw, said someone named Santiago would pay double once they knew whose horse they'd stolen." Santiago. The name hit like a physical blow. Roberto Santiago had died 20 years ago by McGraw's own hand. But he'd had a son, just a boy then. A boy who'd sworn revenge while standing over his father's body. "Mary, Emma, cover your ears." McGraw waited until they complied, then fired 3 shots into the air. The prearranged signal would bring Sheriff Parker running. "Help's coming. Tell Tom everything you told me. And Mary," he paused at the barn door, "the Petersons were good people. This won't go unanswered." "John." Mary's voice stopped him. "They're animals. What they did to Jack, to my boy." Her eyes hardened. "Make it slow." Outside, McGraw mounted up, his decision made. He'd tried to leave the killing behind, tried to honor Sarah's wish for peace. But some men only understood one language, and he was about to give them a lesson they'd take to their graves. The tracks led toward Broken Tooth Ridge, just as Emma had said. Thunder was still fighting. McGraw could see where the horse had broken free twice, only to be recaptured. Each time, the signs of violence grew worse. Miller was losing patience, and that made him even more dangerous. "I'm coming, boy," McGraw promised the wind. "Just hold on a little longer." Behind him, the Peterson place burned, adding its smoke to the gathering storm clouds. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what happened when Mad Dog Miller learned exactly why they called him Deadeye. And somewhere up on Broken Tooth Ridge, a young Santiago waited, using Miller's brutality to draw out his father's killer, about to learn that some legends don't fade with time. They just sleep, waiting for the right moment to show the world why they were feared in the first place. Luke Miller's trail split from the others at Broken Tooth Ridge, leading down into a narrow canyon. McGraw read the signs like a book. The younger Miller was hurting bad, probably from Thunder's kick to the ribs. He'd fallen behind, become a liability to his brother's escape. Mad Dog Miller wasn't known for brotherly loyalty. He'd abandoned Luke just like he'd left Cortez to die in the creek bed. McGraw dismounted, leading his bay carefully. The canyon walls rose steep on both sides, perfect for an ambush. But Luke was injured, desperate, and making rookie mistakes. A scuff mark here, a displaced stone there. He might as well have left a trail of breadcrumbs. The first shot came from behind a boulder, wild and panicked. McGraw had already moved, his old instincts flowing like water. His return fire was precise, one round that sparked off the rock exactly where Luke's gun hand would be if he tried to shoot again. That was a warning, McGraw called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. Next one takes your gun hand clean off. Your choice. A harsh laugh answered him, followed by a wet cough. Deadeye McGraw, brother said you'd come, said you couldn't help yourself once we took that horse. Speaking of your brother, looks like he left you behind. Family loyalty only goes so far. With Mad Dog, doesn't it? Another cough, longer this time. He'll come back, always does. Like he came back for Cortez? McGraw moved silently to his left, keeping to the shadows. Found him dead in the creek bed. Desert's a hard place to die alone, Luke, especially with broken ribs. A pause, then. How'd you know about the ribs? My horse told me. Thunder's got a mean kick when he's riled. Probably punctured your lung. Way you're coughing. You've got maybe a day before the fever sets in. Less in this heat. Luke's voice wavered. You're trying to trick me. James will be back with help. Santiago promised. Santiago? McGraw's voice turned cold. Roberto's boy put you up to this? What's his play, Luke? Why my horse? Movement behind the boulder, Luke trying to get a better position, but his injuries made him slow. McGraw could have taken the shot 3 times over, but he needed information more than another notch on his gun. Don't know details, Luke gasped. James handles the planning. Said Santiago's been watching you, waiting. Said stealing the horse would force you to show your true colors, prove you're still a killer. And the Petersons, that family. You butchered? Was that part of Santiago's plan too? Silence, then a weak laugh. That was James. Said we needed to leave a message. Show everyone Deadeye McGraw couldn't protect his own backyard. McGraw's patience ended. In one fluid motion, he stepped out from behind his cover, gun raised. Luke Miller lay slumped against the boulder, blood staining his prison shirt where broken ribs had punctured through. His gun hand trembled as he tried to aim. I could kill you right now, McGraw said quietly. Be justified after what you did to the Petersons. But I'm giving you a choice. Drop the gun. Tell me everything about Santiago's plan, and I'll get you to a doctor. Luke's eyes widened. You'd show mercy after all this? Mercy's not my specialty, but I made a promise once to someone special. Been trying to keep it 20 years now. The younger Miller studied McGraw's face, seeing something there that made his gun hand lower slightly. They said you were the devil himself, that you killed 7 men in 7 minutes when Santiago's gang... 8 minutes, McGraw corrected, and that was a lifetime ago. Your choice, Luke. Death here in the dirt, or a chance to make things right. Luke Miller's gun hit the ground. As McGraw moved to secure it, the younger man spoke again, his voice fading. James and Santiago, they're meeting at Ghost Canyon. 3 days from now, planning something big, something worse than stealing horses. McCullough bound Luke's hands, then examined his wounds. The ribs were bad, but survivable with quick medical attention. "Ghost Canyon's 2 days' hard ride from here. Why wait 3 days?" "Because," Luke coughed, blood staining his lips. "That's when the army payroll comes through, 10,000 in gold, escorted by just 6 men. Santiago's got 20 riders waiting, and James loves an audience when he kills." James Mad Dog Miller was learning why they called the horse Thunder. The massive black stallion had already thrown him twice, nearly trampled one of Santiago's men who tried to help, and was now standing defiantly in a makeshift corral, ears pinned back, daring anyone to come closer. "Devil's horse!" Santiago's man spat, nursing his bruised shoulder. "Worth more trouble than gold." Miller's face darkened as he examined the fresh bite marks on his arm. "Worth plenty to the right buyer." Santiago said McCullough's bloodline horses fetch top dollar in Mexico, special breeding stock. But it wasn't just about money anymore. The horse had made it personal, just like its owner would soon learn. Miller touched the fresh bruises on his ribs, his rage building. No horse had ever defied him like this. No man either, except the one tracking them. Should have killed it back. "At the Peterson place," another of Santiago's men suggested. "Ain't worth the trouble." "Santiago wants it alive," Miller growled. "Says it's not about the horse anyway. It's about McCullough, about proving the legend's gone soft." He spat in the dust. "Where's my brother?" "Ain't caught up yet. Probably dead from them broken ribs." Miller didn't respond. Luke had always been the weak one, too soft for the life they'd chosen. If he couldn't keep up, he deserved whatever fate found him. But something else bothered Miller more than his brother's absence. The tracks they'd been leaving. McCullough was gaining on them. Every camp they made, every rest they took, the distance closed. It wasn't natural. No man could track like that. Red sign that wasn't there. Almost like he could smell their trail on the wind. Thunder reared suddenly, hooves slashing the air as another man tried to approach with a rope. The stallion's eyes showed white, but there was intelligence there, not panic. He was fighting smart, conserving strength, waiting for opportunities, just like his master, Miller muttered. He'd studied McCullough's reputation, learned everything he could about the man they called Deadeye. 37 notches on his gun, each one earned fair and square in face-to-face confrontations. No bushwhacking, no backshooting. A man of principles. Until Santiago's father pushed him too far. "You sure about this plan?" Santiago's man asked, watching Thunder warily. "Provoking Deadeye McCullough. My pa used to say that's like poking a sleeping rattler with a short stick." Miller's hand dropped. To his gun, a new Colt he'd taken off a dead prison guard. McCullough's been playing farmer for 20 years. Man goes soft, loses his edge. By the time he catches up to us, if he catches up, he'll find out times have changed. Fast guns like him are relics. Thunder's head came up suddenly, nostrils flaring. The stallion moved to the corral's edge, facing east toward the rising sun. A low rumble built in his chest, almost like his namesake. The hair on Miller's neck rose. He'd seen smart horses before, but this was different. Almost like the animal. Knew something they didn't. "He's coming," Santiago's man whispered, crossing himself. "Horse knows his master's close." "Let him come," Miller snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "We've got numbers, good position, and once Santiago's main force arrives..." A shot cracked in the distance, echoing off canyon walls, then another. Signal shots, but from where? "That's Luke's location," one of the men said. "Should we..." "No!" Miller's voice was hard. "We stick to the plan. Ghost Canyon's 1 day's ride. Santiago's waiting with 20 guns. Let McCullough follow. He's riding right into a trap." But as he spoke, Thunder's rumble grew louder, becoming a challenging stallion scream that echoed through the hills. The sound carried power, defiance, and a promise that made even Miller's hardened men step back. "Devil's horse!" someone repeated, softly. Miller drew his gun, aiming at Thunder's head. One shot would end this, pay or no pay. But as his finger tightened on the trigger, he remembered Santiago's words. "Kill the horse, and I'll feed you to the buzzards myself." This isn't about money. It's about making a legend face his own darkness. The gun lowered slowly. Thunder watched him with knowing eyes, proud and unafraid. The stallion's strength was unbroken, his spirit untamed, just like the man who was coming for them, getting closer with every passing hour, for the first time. Since breaking out of Yuma, James Mad Dog Miller felt something he'd thought himself incapable of feeling. Doubt. They'd stolen more than a horse. They'd awakened something that should have been left sleeping. And somewhere out there in the desert, Deadeye McGraw was teaching them the price of their mistake, one bullet at a time. The sun was setting when McGraw found the body. Not Luke Miller. He'd left the younger brother with a doctor in Thunder Creek, but someone altogether more troubling. Colonel Marcus Wade lay face down in the dust, a bullet hole in his back, his U.S. Marshal's badge torn from his chest. "Hello, old friend," McGraw muttered, kneeling beside the body. "What brought you out here?" 20 years ago, Wade had been the one who'd given him the name Deadeye, also the one who'd tried to arrest him after the Santiago massacre, claiming 7 dead men, no matter how deserving, required justice. Their last meeting had ended with Wade nursing a bullet in his shoulder, promising next time would be different. Now here he lay, executed from behind. Not Miller's style, he liked his victims to see death coming. This was professional work, clean, military. A folded paper in Wade's hand caught McGraw's attention. Blood-stained but readable. It was a warrant. Not for the Miller brothers, but for McGraw himself. Dated 3 days ago, signed by a federal judge. "Still trying to bring me in, Marcus?" McGraw carefully closed the dead man's eyes. "Someone used you for bait, same as they're using Thunder." Movement caught his eye, a flash of light from the ridge above, rifle scope. McGraw rolled behind a boulder as shots kicked up dust where he'd been kneeling. 3 shooters, firing with military precision, the kind of men who'd shoot a U.S. Marshal in the back. "Deadeye McGraw," a voice called out, cultured, educated. "That's close enough. The colonel was a necessary sacrifice to get your attention." McGraw studied the shooters. Positions, noting angles, cover, distances. "You've got it, along with a murder charge when I reach you." "Ah, but you won't. You see, I studied how you work. Close-range specialist, legendary with that peacemaker. But these rifles can reach you long before you get within pistol range. Modern times, Mr. McGraw. Modern solutions." The voice triggered a memory. "Captain Reynolds," McGraw called back. "Heard you left the army. Private security now, isn't it?" A pause. "You remember, I'm flattered." Man who trained Roberto Santiago's security team. Hard to forget. Especially since you disappeared right before they hit my ranch. Reynolds' laugh echoed off the canyon walls. Ancient history. "Today, I'm simply ensuring you don't interfere with certain business arrangements. The Miller brothers have a task to complete, one that requires your full attention." The army payroll. McGraw's mind raced, putting pieces together. "You're working with Santiago's son. Very good. But it's more complex than that. You see, young Santiago doesn't just want revenge. He wants to destroy your legend, show the territory that Deadeye McGraw is obsolete. A relic, easily outmaneuvered by modern tactics. McGraw's hand tightened on his peacemaker. 3 rifles, long range, impossible odds with a pistol. But Reynolds had made one crucial mistake. He was still talking. "Your horse was just the beginning," Reynolds continued. "By now, Miller should be at Ghost Canyon, 20 men waiting. The payroll's a bonus. The real prize is watching you walk into a trap, trying to save a horse that probably isn't even alive anymore." Another shot kicked up dust, closer this time. A warning. "Walk away, McGraw. Go back to your ranch. Times have changed. Men like you belong in dime novels, not the modern West." McGraw's response was a single shot that shattered Reynolds' rifle. "Scope, sending the captain scrambling for cover. The other two rifles opened up, but McGraw was already moving, using the terrain like he'd done 1,000 times before. "Impossible," Reynolds shouted. "No one can make that shot with a pistol. That's why they call me Deadeye." McGraw's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Modern times don't change some things, Captain. Like how men who talk too much give away their positions." A thrown rock clattered to Reynolds' left, drawing fire from his men. By the time they realized their mistake, McGraw had flanked their position. 2 shots rang out, precise as surgery. 2 rifles tumbled down the slope. Reynolds broke and ran, showing the same cowardice he'd displayed 20 years ago. McGraw let him go. The captain would run straight to Santiago, confirm McGraw was still every bit as dangerous as legend painted him. Returning to Wade's body, McGraw took the warrant, noting the judge's name for future reference. Then he buried his old friend, properly marking the grave with Wade's own knife. "Rest easy, Marcus," he said softly. "I'll finish what you started. Find out who's really behind all this." The sun had set by the time he mounted up, but McGraw didn't need light to follow Thunder's trail. Reynolds had confirmed the horse was alive, probably at Ghost Canyon. Had also confirmed what McGraw had suspected. This was about more than revenge or money. Someone was trying to erase the old ways, replace men like him with modern solutions. They'd chosen Thunder as their bait, Ghost Canyon as their trap. Time to show them why some legends never die. Ghost Canyon lived up to its name as night fell, wind howling through stone formations like lost souls seeking rest. Mad Dog Miller paced the makeshift camp, his nerves fraying with each passing hour. 4 of Santiago's men were dead now. 3, thrown by Thunder in their attempts to control him. 1 trampled when he got too close with a branding iron. "Your brother talked." Santiago's voice cut through the darkness. The young Mexican stepped into the firelight, his expensive clothes and educated manner a sharp contrast to his father's brutal heritage. "Reynolds just rode in. Says Luke spilled everything to McGraw." Miller's hand dropped to his gun. "Luke's weak, always has been, but McGraw won't reach us in time. Not with Reynolds' men slowing him down." Santiago's laugh held no humor. "Reynolds is dead, along with his 2 best men. Your famous modern tactics failed against an old man with a 6-gun. He moved closer to the fire, its light casting his face in demonic shadows. "Tell me, Miller, are all your promises this worthless?" Thunder's challenging scream split the night, drawing every eye to the makeshift corral. The stallion stood like a midnight statue, his coat gleaming with sweat, sides heaving from his latest battle. 3 broken ropes dangled from his neck, testament to his continued defiance. "Control that beast," Santiago snapped. "If he brings McGraw down on us before we're ready—" "Control him yourself," Miller snarled. "Your plan's falling apart. Luke captured, Reynolds dead, and now I hear McGraw. Killed Colonel Wade, too. Man's supposed to be a broken-down old rancher, but he's cutting through your men like they're made of paper." Santiago's men stirred restlessly at Miller's tone. Their loyalty was bought with gold, but their fear of Deadeye McGraw was earned. With lead, already 2 had deserted, taking their chances with the law rather than face the legend they'd helped awaken. "The plan remains," Santiago said quietly, "dangerous as a coiled snake. McGraw follows the horse. The horse is here. Tomorrow the army payroll passes through the canyon, guarded by 6 men who don't know they're riding into an ambush. McGraw arrives to find us waiting, 20 guns against 1. Even a legend dies when the odds are high enough." 20? Miller laughed harshly. "Count again, boy. You're down to 15, and those are getting shakier by the hour. Your father tried the same thing, numbers against skill. I heard McGraw killed him anyway, along with his whole gang." Santiago's hand blurred, fast as a striking rattler. The knife appeared at Miller's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "Careful, friend. My father died because he underestimated McGraw. I've spent 20 years planning this moment. Everything, the horse, the payroll, even your prison break, all of it brought us here. Planning don't mean much when—" Miller's words cut off as the knife pressed deeper. "When what? When your brother betrays us. When hired guns run from an old man's reputation. That's exactly what I planned for." Santiago's smile was terrible to behold. "McCullough's legend grows with every man he kills, tracking us. By the time he reaches Ghost Canyon, his reputation will be bigger than ever. And when 20 witnesses see him die trying to rob an army payroll—" Understanding dawned in Miller's eyes. "The horse, the gold, it's all just bait. You're not trying to kill him, you're trying to destroy what he stands for." "The territory's changing," Santiago agreed, withdrawing the knife. "No place for legends anymore. McCullough dies a criminal trying to steal from the army. Everything he built, every noble deed, erased by one final desperate act." Thunder screamed again, this time answered by a distant rumble of hooves. One of Santiago's men burst into the firelight, face pale with fear. "Riders coming. Army patrol must have changed their schedule." Santiago's composed manner cracked slightly. "How many?" "6, maybe 7. Following our back trail, they must have found Wade's body." Miller saw his chance. "Army finds us here. Whole plan falls apart. Better run, boy. Wouldn't want to face real soldiers instead of one old gunfighter." The knife flashed again, but this time Miller was ready. His gun cleared leather as Santiago's blade sliced air. Both men froze, steel against steel, each knowing the next move would be fatal. "You need me," Miller said softly. "These men follow you because of your gold, but they respect me. I can hold them together one more day, long enough to finish this." Santiago's eyes narrowed, calculating. Finally, the knife lowered. "One more day. After McCullough falls, you'll get your money, assuming you live that long." As if to punctuate his words, Thunder's defiant scream echoed through Ghost Canyon again. But this time, carried on the night wind, came an answering sound, 3 evenly spaced shots, like someone signaling their approach or marking their targets. The storm hit Ghost Canyon like God's own fury. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the twisted rock formations in stark bursts of white fire. Thunder, the real kind, shook the canyon walls, setting loose rocks tumbling into the depths. But through the chaos of wind and rain, McCullough heard something else, the screams of a horse in distress. "Hold on, boy," he muttered, guiding his mount carefully along the treacherous path. The bay was nervous, fighting the wind that threatened to push them off the narrow trail. But McCullough had chosen him for his steady nature, and the horse lived. Up to it now, a massive lightning strike revealed the scene ahead, Santiago's men struggling to control Thunder as the storm spooked the already agitated stallion. The makeshift corral was breaking apart, poles snapping in the fierce wind. And there, scrambling to secure the horse, was one of Miller's old prison guards, now working for Santiago. The man never saw McCullough coming. One moment he was fighting with a rope, the next he was being pulled into the shadows. McCullough's hand clamped over his mouth, gun pressed to his ribs. "Quiet," McCullough ordered. "Nod if you understand." The guard nodded frantically. "How many men still with Santiago?" 15, the guard whispered when McCullough's hand moved, "but 3 more ran when the storm hit. They're saying it's an omen, that you brought it with you." Lightning flashed again, showing Thunder rearing against his ropes. The stallion's eyes were wild, but McCullough saw recognition there. His boy knew help was coming. "Miller and Santiago," McCullough pressed. "They still working together?" "Not for long." The guard shivered, as much from fear as cold. "Almost killed each other an hour ago. Miller's losing control, seeing threats everywhere. Santiago's got plans within plans, using everyone." A terrible crack split the air as a lightning bolt struck the canyon rim. Rock exploded, sending a cascade of debris toward the camp. Men scattered, abandoning Thunder to save themselves. McCullough saw his chance, but so did Miller. The outlaw appeared through the rain, gun drawn, moving toward the panicking horse. His intention was clear. If he couldn't control Thunder, no one would. McGraw's first shot took Miller's hat off, forcing him to dive for cover. The second sparked off rock near his head. The third never came, because Santiago's men had regrouped, filling the air with lead. Thunder screamed again, pulling free of his weakened ropes. But instead of running, the stallion charged straight at Miller, who had emerged to take another shot. The outlaw's eyes widened in terror as 1,000 pounds of angry horse bore down on him. Miller's gun barked once, the shot going wild as he dove aside. Thunder's hooves missed him by inches, striking sparks off the rocks. The stallion wheeled, preparing for another charge, when the canyon wall above them groaned. "Slide!" someone screamed. "The whole rim's coming down!" McCullough burst from cover, firing precisely despite the chaos. 2 of Santiago's men fell, clearing a path. But it wasn't toward Thunder he ran, it was toward Miller, who lay trapped beneath fallen rocks, directly in the path of the coming slide. "Leave." "Me?" Miller snarled as McCullough reached him. "Rather die than owe you anything." "Shut up and push," McCullough grunted, heaving at the largest boulder. Together, they managed to free Miller's leg just as the main slide hit. Thunder appeared through the rain like a ghost, positioning himself between them and the worst of the debris. McCullough grabbed Miller's collar, dragging him into a small cave. As tons of rock thundered past, for long minutes the world was nothing but noise and fury. When it finally quieted, they emerged to find the canyon transformed. The trail Santiago's men had used was gone, buried under tons of rock. Thunder stood nearby, mud-caked but unharmed, watching McCullough with trusting eyes. "Why?" Miller asked, his voice rough. "Could have let me die. Should have." "Man I used to be would have," McCullough replied, checking Thunder for injuries. "Been trying to be someone else these past 20 years. Santiago won't stop," Miller warned. "Doesn't matter that you saved me. He's got something planned, something bigger than the payroll job." McCullough's hand rested on Thunder's neck, feeling the stallion's strength flow into him. "Tell me!" But before Miller could speak, shots rang out from above. Santiago's men had found another way around, and this time they had the high ground. The storm's fury redoubled, as if nature itself was choosing sides in what was to come. Thunder's answering scream was a challenge that echoed through Ghost Canyon, declaring to all that the real battle was just beginning. The storm passed, leaving Ghost Canyon silent except for the drip of water on stone. McCullough and Miller had taken shelter in a shallow cave, Thunder standing guard outside, while Santiago's men searched the canyon rim above. But it wasn't gunfire that broke the quiet. It was a child's scream. "Army patrol," Miller explained, seeing McCullough's expression harden. "Santiago's men ambushed them during the storm. Captain had his family with him, wife and daughter, traveling to his new post." McCullough's hand tightened on his peacemaker. "How many hostages?" 3. Santiago's got them up at the old mine entrance, using them to control the other soldiers too. 6 men, all surrendered to save the captain's family." Another scream echoed through the canyon. McCullough moved to the cave entrance, studying the terrain with experienced eyes. The mine entrance was visible 200 feet up, carved into the canyon wall. 2 guards visible, probably more inside. The path up was exposed. Anyone trying to climb would be shot long before reaching the top. "Santiago's losing control," Miller continued, his voice low. "Storm scattered his men. Landslide cut off our escape route. He's getting desperate, talking crazy about legacy and sending messages." Messages. Keep saying this is about more than money or revenge. Wants to show the whole territory that law and order are just illusions, that even heroes break when you push them hard enough. The pieces clicked into place. The payroll was never the real target. This whole thing, stealing Thunder, the hostages, all of it, it's about forcing me to make an impossible choice. Miller nodded grimly. "Santiago figures you'll have to shoot your way through the hostages to get to him. Prove you're still a killer at heart, or watch them die knowing you could have saved them, breaking your legend another way." Thunder's ears pricked forward as more voices carried down from the mine. Santiago was shouting at someone, his cultured accent cracking with strain. A woman pleaded, followed by the sharp sound of a slap. McGraw turned to Miller. "Your leg still working? Well enough. Why? Because you're going to help me save those people." Miller laughed harshly. "Me? I'm an outlaw, McGraw, killed more men than I can count. Why would I help you?" "Because you had a chance to shoot me during the landslide. Didn't take it. Man who'd let children die wouldn't have shown that mercy." The outlaw was silent for a long moment, watching Thunder patrol their position like a war horse of old. Finally, he spoke. "Santiago's got men posted all around the rim. No way to reach those hostages without being seen." "Unless," McGraw said, quietly, "they're watching something else instead." Understanding dawned in Miller's eyes. "Thunder. Let him run free. Draw their attention. While we use that old service tunnel you've been eyeing for the past 10 minutes, one that probably connects to the mine from below." Miller's expression showed grudging respect. "Might work, but Santiago's no fool. He'll have men guarding the hostages even if we get inside. That's why I need you. Man who broke out of 3 prisons, knows how to cause a distraction. Might get me killed. Might give you a chance to die better than you lived." More shouts from above, followed by the unmistakable sound of a rifle butt striking flesh. The captain's daughter screamed for her father. Miller's face hardened. "Always hated men who hurt children. Even in prison we had rules about that." He checked his gun, a habit born of hard experience. "How do you want to play this?" McGraw outlined. His plan quickly. It was dangerous, dependent on split-second timing and a lot of luck, but he'd seen something in Miller during the storm, a glimmer of the man he might have been in another life. "They'll kill you if they catch you," he warned. Miller managed a grim smile. "Way I figure it, Deadeye. I've been living on borrowed time since you saved me from that slide. Might as well spend it on something worthwhile." Thunder approached. As if sensing their intent, his intelligent eyes fixed on McGraw. The stallion had fought his own battles during the storm, earned his own legend among Santiago's men. "One more ride, boy," McGraw said softly, removing Thunder's ropes. "Show them why they feared you even before they knew who owned you." The stallion tossed his head proudly, understanding in his stance. As McGraw and Miller slipped toward the hidden tunnel entrance, Thunder moved to the canyon center, his black coat gleaming in the post-storm sun. Then he screamed, a war cry that echoed off the canyon walls like judgment itself, and began the deadliest performance of his life. Thunder's diversion worked better than anyone could have expected. The stallion charged up and down the canyon, kicking up dust, drawing shots from Santiago's men who'd been ordered to keep him alive. But it wasn't just random chaos. The horse was systematically exposing shooter positions, forcing them to reveal themselves. In the old service tunnel, McGraw and Miller moved silently, counting gunshots above. Each shot meant one less bullet that could be used against them later, but it was Miller who spotted something that changed everything. "McGraw," he whispered, holding his lantern higher, "look at these support beams." The wooden supports weren't old mining timbers. They were new, professionally installed, railroad-grade lumber, precisely cut and expertly placed. "This isn't just a mine tunnel," McGraw realized. "It's an advanced survey shaft, railroads coming through Ghost Canyon. Worth millions in land rights," Miller added. "Santiago's father owned most of this canyon before you killed him. Now the son's got paper on all of it, except your ranch at the north end." The pieces fell into place. The horse, the payroll, the hostages, all of it's about forcing me off my land. Dead or in jail, either way the railroad gets their right-of-way. More shots echoed above, followed by Thunder's defiant scream. But now they heard something else, the rhythmic pounding of a telegraph key. Following the sound, they found a hidden office carved into the rock. Maps covered one wall, showing the planned railroad route running straight through McGraw's ranch. But it was the telegraph transcripts scattered across the desk that told the real story. "These are from months ago," McCullough said, reading quickly. "Orders to the prison guards to make sure Miller and his brother were put in the same cell block. Arrangements for Santiago's men to be in position. Even the army patrol's route was changed deliberately." Miller picked up another paper, his face darkening. "Judge Harrison's signature, authorizing the sale of my brother's seized property to Santiago's front company. Same judge who signed your arrest warrant." "Harrison?" McGraw's voice was dangerous. "He's been a friend for 20 years. Helped me buy that ranch when I was trying to leave the gun behind. According to this, he owns 30% of Santiago's railroad investment company, along with—" Miller paused, double-checking the name. "Sheriff Tom Parker." The betrayal hit McCullough like a physical blow. Parker had been there from the beginning, watching him build a new life. Had even tried to talk him out of pursuing the horse thieves, because he knew what was really happening. A child's cry from above snapped them back to the present situation. But now they understood. The hostages weren't just leverage against McCullough. They were witnesses, meant to see the famous Deadeye McCullough either break his moral code or die trying to keep it. "Railroad's announcement goes out tomorrow," Miller said, reading another telegram. "Ghost Canyon route's already been approved. Santiago just needs your land. Judge Harrison's ordered a foreclosure hearing claiming you abandoned the property to pursue outlaws. And if I die trying to save those hostages or get arrested for killing soldiers during a rescue attempt, Harrison gets to auction your ranch for back taxes. Santiago's company already has the winning bid prepared." Thunder's screaming changed tone, a warning sound McCullough recognized. Someone was coming down the tunnel. They concealed themselves just as two of Santiago's men appeared, carrying more telegraph equipment. Their conversation confirmed everything. "Railroad's paying $2 million for the right-of-way," one said. "Santiago's old man was sitting on a fortune and never knew it. Better than gold," the other agreed. "Once McCullough's land is seized, whole canyon belongs to the investors. Harrison makes us all rich, and Deadeye's legend dies trying to save a horse." McCullough's gun hand tightened, but Miller caught his arm. More voices were approaching from behind. They were about to be trapped in the narrow tunnel. "Time to choose," Miller whispered. "Stop them now and lose our chance to save the hostages, or let them pass and risk the evidence being destroyed." Above them, thunder screamed once more. But this time, it sounded almost like laughter. McCullough and Miller let Santiago's men pass, though every instinct screamed to stop them. Once the tunnel was clear, McCullough pulled out Sarah's photograph, worn smooth from 20 years in his pocket. The ranch had been her dream, a place where a killer could find peace, where a gunman could build instead of destroy. "Harrison helped us buy that land," McCullough said quietly. "Stood with me at Sarah's funeral. All this time. Man can justify anything when there's enough money involved," Miller replied. $2 million in railroad money buys a lot of friendship." More papers on the desk caught McCullough's attention. Old land deeds, property transfers, dating back 20 years. The betrayal went deeper than he'd imagined. "Harrison didn't just help me buy the ranch." McCullough's voice turned cold. "He made sure I bought that specific piece of land. They've been planning this since Sarah died." "Playing a long game," Miller agreed. "Wait for the railroad surveys, then force you out when the time was right." Even Santiago's father's death was probably part of it. Create a blood feud that could be used later. Thunder's vigilant screams continued above, but now they heard answering shots from new positions. Santiago's reinforcements had arrived, the ones who'd been delayed by the storm. 20 more guns, Miller estimated. And now we know why they need so many. This isn't just about the hostages or the payroll. When this is over, they need witnesses to swear Deadeye McGraw died trying to rob an army gold shipment. McGraw's hand touched his peacemaker, feeling the 37 notches worn smooth by time, each one a story, each one justified. But Sarah had helped him see that justice and vengeance weren't always the same thing. "All these years," he said softly, "I thought I was changing, becoming someone Sarah would be proud of. But they were just waiting, watching me try to build something good on top of their lies." A child's cry echoed through the tunnel again, followed by Santiago's cultured voice. "Time's running out, McGraw! Show yourself, or the girl dies first." Miller checked his ammunition. "He's getting desperate. Probably got word the railroad announcement's been moved up. Needs this finished today." This was never about Santiago's revenge, McGraw realized. Harrison and Parker needed someone to pressure me, someone whose grudge would explain why I'd returned to violence. They've been using him just like they used me. Question is, what are you going to do about it? McGraw studied the tunnel ahead, listening to Thunder's strategic movements above. 20 years ago, he would have gone in shooting, trusting his speed and skill to see him through. But Sarah had taught him there were other ways to fight. "They want Deadeye McGraw." His voice carried the weight of decision. "Let's show them what that really means." He pulled out paper and pencil, quickly drafting a message. "Get this to Sheriff Parker. He'll be watching from the South Ridge, coordinating with Harrison." Miller read the note, his eyes widening. "This could work, but you'll be exposed, completely vulnerable while you... Sometimes a man has to stand in the light to cast the right shadow." McGraw smiled grimly. "Sarah taught me that. Time these men learned what it really means to face a legend." Thunder's scream changed pitch, 3 sharp blasts like a bugle, calling cavalry to charge. The horse had spotted something important. "Make the choice, McGraw," Santiago called down. "Your horse, the hostages, or your reputation. No man can save all 3. But Santiago was wrong. Deadeye McGraw wasn't just a man anymore. He was an idea. And ideas, properly used, could be more powerful than any gun. "Ready?" McGraw asked. Miller, the outlaw, nodded, his own redemption waiting in the choice ahead. "Lead on, Deadeye. Let's show them why some legends never die." Sheriff Tom Parker lowered his spyglass, frowning at the scene in Ghost Canyon below. Something had changed. Thunder's wild charges had become methodical, almost strategic, driving Santiago's men into predictable positions. And now Miller, who should have been dead or fled, was walking openly across the canyon floor, waving a white flag. "Message from McGraw," Miller shouted, holding up a paper. "For Parker's eyes only," Santiago's voice carried from the mine entrance. "Shoot him!" "Try it," Miller called back. "Then you'll never know what Deadeye's planning. Man doesn't send messages unless he's got you beaten already." Parker's fingers drummed nervously on his saddle horn. 2 decades of guilty knowledge weighed on him. 20 years of watching McGraw build a life on borrowed time, knowing the railroad would eventually come. Now everything was unraveling. "Bring it up," he ordered one of his deputies. The message, when it came, was simple. "Tom, remember Carson Creek? Same rules apply. You've got 1 hour to make this right." Parker's face went pale. Carson Creek had been early in McGraw's career. 7 men dead because a corrupt sheriff thought he could control the situation. That sheriff had died last, watching everything he'd built crumble around him. "Sir," his deputy asked, "what should we do?" Parker looked down at Ghost Canyon, seeing it through new eyes. Thunder's movements had herded Santiago's men into 3 main groups. The hostages were visible at the mine entrance, but McGraw was nowhere to be seen. And Judge Harrison was due any minute with the railroad papers and arrest warrant. "Get word to Harrison," Parker said finally. "Tell him." He paused, weighing 20 years of friendship against the certainty in McGraw's message. "Tell him Deadeye knows everything." Meanwhile, in the old tunnel beneath the canyon, McGraw was preparing for what would come next. His gun belt lay before him, each cartridge carefully checked. Sarah had taught him that violence should be the last resort, but when it came, it should be decisive. "Santiago's men are getting nervous," Miller reported, returning from his messenger mission. "Parker looked ready to break, and Thunder's got them bunched up exactly where you wanted." "Horse always did have more sense than most men," McGraw replied, loading his peacemaker with the same careful precision he'd used for 30 years. "How many stayed with Santiago after your little walk?" 15 up top, maybe 10 more in the mine tunnels. Rest ran when they realized Parker might turn. But Santiago's got the hostages wired with dynamite. Says if anyone makes a move... McGraw nodded grimly. "And Harrison? Due within the hour, bringing some kind of legal papers. Santiago's getting desperate, keeps talking about legends and lessons. Man forgets what his father learned the hard way." McGraw stood, checking his gun. One final time. "Legends aren't about speed or skill. They're about knowing when to act." Thunder's scream echoed through the canyon again. 3 short bursts followed by a long call. The signal they'd worked out over years of partnership. "Harrison's here," McGraw said, recognizing his horse's warning. "Right on time. Still don't understand how this plays out," Miller admitted. "They've got hostages, high ground, and 40 guns. Even Deadeye McGraw can't beat those odds." McGraw smiled slightly. "Who said anything about beating them? Sometimes winning isn't about being faster or stronger. Sometimes it's about making men face what they really are." He pulled out Sarah's photograph one last time, touching it gently, before returning it to his pocket. "You get the hostages clear when I give the signal. Don't worry about me." "And Santiago? Man wants to destroy a legend?" McGraw checked his spare ammunition. "Let's show him how legends are really made." Above them, they heard Harrison's voice joining the chorus of confusion. The judge had arrived, bringing with him the weight of law and order, or at least his corrupt version of it. Thunder screamed once more, but this time it wasn't a warning. It was a challenge, echoing off the canyon walls like judgment itself. The horse had played his part perfectly, positioning their enemies exactly where McGraw needed them. "Time to choose sides," McGraw told Miller. "Last chance to walk away." The outlaw checked his own gun with hands that had killed dozens, but now shook slightly with the weight of redemption. "Figure I've been walking away my whole life. About time I stood for something." McGraw nodded, seeing in Miller's eyes the same thing Sarah had once seen in his, the possibility of change, of becoming something better than what life had made you. "Then let's give them what they came for," he said, quietly, "a legend worth remembering. Judge Harrison's arrival changed everything. He rode into Ghost Canyon like a man who owned it, which, McGraw realized, he soon would if their plan failed. The judge's expensive clothes and polished manner seemed out of place among the blood and dust, but his eyes were as cold as any killer's. "Deadeye McGraw," Harrison's voice boomed across the canyon. "By the authority of this court, you are hereby ordered to surrender. Your property has been seized for tax delinquency and criminal abandonment." From their hidden position, McGraw and Miller watched Santiago's men react to the judge's arrival. The hired guns looked uncertain now, realizing they were part of something bigger than a simple revenge plot. "Papers are all legal," Miller whispered, examining documents he'd snatched during his messenger role. "Harrison's been planning this for months. Even got witness statements about you returning to your gunslinger ways." "Man always did love his paperwork," McGraw replied. "Even 20 years ago, when he helped me buy the ranch. Should have known. It was too easy." Above them, the hostage situation was deteriorating. Captain Rogers' daughter had stopped crying, a silence more worrying than her screams. His wife's face showed signs of rough handling, and the soldiers who'd surrendered to save them looked ready to break. "Time's up, McGraw!" Santiago called out. "Witness my father's revenge! When they find these bodies, everyone will know Deadeye." McGraw died trying to steal army gold, killing innocent people in the process. Harrison's voice joined in, reading charges from an official-looking document, but McGraw was watching thunder, seeing how the stallion had maneuvered Santiago's men exactly where they needed them. "You're sure about this plan?" Miller asked, checking his gun one final time. "Lot of things could go wrong." "Already has," McGraw said quietly. "Been going wrong for 20 years. Time to make it right." He stood, stepping out of cover with his hands raised. The motion drew every gun in the canyon, but McGraw walked steadily forward, his own peacemaker holstered. "Hold your fire," Harrison shouted. "Take him alive. We need witnesses." McGraw's voice carried clearly as he approached. "Got your message. Tom, the one about making things right?" He nodded toward Sheriff Parker, who sat his horse with a guilty slump. "Figured it's time we all faced what we really are." "This is a legal proceeding," Harrison blustered, but there was fear in his eyes. "The railroad's coming, McGraw. Progress can't be stopped. Best accept it and surrender peacefully." Progress. McGraw's laugh was cold. "Is that what you call 20 years of lies? Using Santiago's revenge to cover your land grab, making Sarah's dream into part of your scheme?" The name hit Harrison like a bullet. The judge's mask cracked slightly, showing something like shame beneath. "Sarah's death was tragic, but you made sure I bought that specific piece of land," McGraw finished. "Made sure a grieving man had somewhere to go, somewhere you knew the railroad would eventually need." Santiago stepped forward, dynamite detonator in hand. "Enough talk! You're surrounded, outnumbered. Even Deadeye McGraw can't—" Thunder's scream cut him off. The stallion had worked his way behind Santiago's position while all eyes were on McGraw. Now he charged, scattering the men guarding the hostages. "Miller!" McGraw's shout was the signal. The outlaw burst from cover, racing toward the hostages, while McGraw drew his gun with legendary speed. But he didn't fire, not yet. Instead, he aimed at the canyon wall, where Harrison's surveyors had marked the railroad's route. 20 years of planning," McGraw called out. "All depends on this canyon being passable. Be a shame if someone brought those walls down." Harrison's eyes widened. "In understanding, you wouldn't." "The hostages, already clear." McGraw nodded toward where Miller was leading Captain Rogers' family to safety, covered by Thunder's continued chaos. "Which leaves us with a choice. Let them go, all of them, or I bring this whole canyon down around." "Us? You'll die too," Santiago snarled. McGraw's smile was terrible to behold. "Some legends are worth dying for. Question is, are your schemes worth dying for?" The moment balanced on a knife's edge. 40 guns aimed at one man, millions in railroad money hanging on his next move, and 20 years of lies about to be settled once and for all. Thunder screamed again, the sound echoing off canyon walls, that suddenly seemed much less stable. And in that moment, everyone in Ghost Canyon understood exactly why Deadeye McGraw had become a legend in the first place. It wasn't about the gun. Ghost Canyon held its breath. 40 guns aimed at one man, while Thunder's hooves drummed a warrior's beat on the stone. The hostages were clear, Miller leading them to safety, but McGraw hadn't moved. His peacemaker remained trained on the canyon wall, where a single shot could trigger a catastrophic collapse. "Think carefully," McGraw's voice carried the weight of 37 notches. "Railroad can't run through a buried canyon. 20 years of planning, gone in a single shot." Harrison stepped forward, legal papers forgotten in his hand. "For God's sake, John, be reasonable. The railroad's bringing civilization, progress." "Progress." McGraw's laugh was cold as mountain snow. "Tell that to the Petersons. Tell that to Sarah's grave." Santiago's men were breaking, the smarter ones already melting away into the rocks. They'd signed on for a simple revenge plot. Not this high-stakes game of legend and loyalty, but Santiago himself remained, dynamite detonator still clutched. In his shaking hand, "My father died for this canyon," he snarled. 20 years I've waited, planned, built alliances. Your father died because he chose violence over justice." McGraw cut him off. Just like you're choosing now. Thunder moved like liquid shadow, positioning himself perfectly between McGraw and the largest group of gunmen. The horse's intelligence shone in his eyes. He wasn't just a mount, but a partner in this deadly dance. "Parker," McGraw called to the sheriff. "Time to choose. That badge still mean anything?" The sheriff's hand touched his star, feeling the weight of 20 years of compromise. "Harrison promised no one would get hurt, said the railroad would make us all rich." And how many died for that promise? Wade? The Petersons? A shot cracked. Out, one of Santiago's nervous men firing early, but Thunder had already moved, screening McGraw, while the legend's return fire took the shooter's gun hand clean off. "That's one," McGraw said calmly. "Who's next?" The calm question broke something in the canyon. Men began throwing down their weapons, having seen exactly why Deadeye's reputation had endured for 20 years. But Santiago's face twisted with rage. "Kill him," he screamed. "Kill him now." Multiple guns roared, but McGraw and Thunder moved as one. The legend's first shot took Santiago's detonator, the second disarmed Harrison, and the third knocked Parker's badge clean off his chest. Each shot precise, each one sending a message. Then Thunder charged, scattering the remaining gunmen, while McGraw's peacemaker spoke with deadly precision. Not killing, Sarah wouldn't have wanted that, but disarming with surgical accuracy. Gun, hands, weapons, even belt buckles flew as the legend demonstrated why some men are feared even after decades of peace. "Impossible," Harrison whispered, watching his plans collapse. "No one's that fast." "It was never about speed," McGraw replied, his gun now aimed at the judge's heart. "It was about knowing which fights are worth fighting." Santiago made his final move, drawing a hidden derringer. But before he could aim, Thunder's hooves sent him sprawling, the tiny gun flying into the dust. The son of Roberto Santiago lay there, defeated not by bullets, but by the very legend he'd tried to destroy. "Your father died angry," McGraw told him. "You've got a choice about how you live." Parker suddenly spurred his horse forward. "John, I can explain." "Save it for the territorial marshal." Miller's voice rang out as he returned, leading a dozen lawmen into the canyon. "Already sent, and them the evidence. Railroad fraud, conspiracy, murder, figure that adds up to quite a few years." Harrison's face crumpled. "The railroad's still coming, McGraw. You can't stop progress." "Never wanted to." McGraw holstered his legendary gun. "But it'll come honest, or it won't come at all. Sarah taught me that some things are worth more than money." Thunder moved to his master's side, proud and undefeated. Together, they watched as the marshals took custody of Harrison, Parker, and Santiago. The legend of Deadeye McGraw had grown this day, but not for the reasons his enemies had planned. "For 20 years of peace," Miller mused, watching the prisoners led away. "What now?" McGraw patted Thunder's neck, feeling Sarah's spirit in the horse's strength. "Now we build something. Something honest, something true." He smiled slightly. "After all, a legend's only worth something if it stands for what's right." The sun reached high noon as they rode out of Ghost Canyon, leaving behind broken dreams of revenge and greed. But they carried with them something more valuable, proof that some legends endure not because of their skill with a gun, but because of their unwavering commitment to justice. And Thunder's triumphant scream echoed through the canyon one last time, announcing to all that some spirits can never be broken, some legends never die, and some men are remembered not for the lives they take, but for the truths they defend. Dawn painted the desert in shades of gold as McGraw stood on his porch, watching Thunder graze peacefully in the morning light. 3 months had passed since Ghost Canyon, but the changes those events brought still echoed through the territory. Harrison and Parker faced justice, their railroad schemes exposed. The line would still come through, progress couldn't be stopped, but now it would follow an honest path, with fair compensation for all landowners affected. Santiago had chosen a different path, accepting McGraw's offer of mercy and turning. State's evidence against the corrupt officials. Miller stood beside McCullough now, no longer an outlaw, but the ranch's foreman. His knowledge of the law's darker side proved invaluable in helping other families fight against corrupt land grabs. Some said seeing him work alongside the legendary Deadeye McCullough gave hope to others seeking redemption. Railroad companies. Representative arrives today, Miller reported. Want me to handle it? McCullough shook his head, touching Sarah's photograph in his pocket. Some things a man needs to do himself. Thunder raised his head, nickering a greeting as Captain Rogers and his family rode up. The army officer had become a frequent visitor, his wife and daughter treating McCullough like family. They brought news that the territory governor was offering McCullough a marshal's badge, a chance to fight corruption legally. Thinking about accepting, McCullough told Miller as they watched the Rogers family approach, Sarah always said a man should build something worthwhile. And the legend of Deadeye McCullough? Let it stand as a reminder. McCullough smiled as Thunder trotted over to greet their visitors. Some legends are about justice, not violence, about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another day of honest work and righteous purpose. The railroad would come, bringing its changes, but it would find something stronger than progress already built here. A foundation of integrity, laid by a man who chose to be more than his reputation. Quite a story, Miller mused. The horse that saved a legend by making him remember who he really was. McCullough patted Thunder's proud neck, feeling Sarah's dream living on in every peaceful sunrise. Some horses are more than just horses, he said quietly, and some legends are more than just stories. Thunder's gentle nicker seemed to agree as another day began at the ranch, where a gunslinger had found peace without surrendering his principles, where a horse's loyalty had reminded a legend that true strength lies not in the fights we choose, but in the truths we defend.